The clatter of metal trays echoed through Graystone's infirmary as routine checkups carried on. Lena Marsh sat stiffly on the examination table, her hands twisting the edge of her orange sleeves. She expected nothing unusual, just another round of questions, another needle in her arm. Dr. Mason Hale adjusted his glasses, scanning her file with a frown that deepened the longer his eyes lingered. He tapped the chart once, then looked at her with quiet hesitation. "Lena, when was your last cycle?" Her brow furrowed. "Months ago, but stress does that. You know that." The doctor exhaled slowly, as though weighing every word. "You're pregnant." The air thinned. Lena blinked, confusion knotting her face before denial poured from her lips. "That's impossible, I haven't." She shook her head violently. "You're wrong. Test again." But the test was clear, and the silence that followed pressed against the sterile white walls. By evening, the whisper had slithered from cell to cell. Women leaned over bunks, eyes wide, voices hushed, pregnant. How? No man had stepped foot inside their units. No conjugal visits, no unsupervised contact. Inmates pointed, some smirking with cruelty, others whispering with fear. Carla Vega, 2 cells down, muttered to her bunkmate, "Either she's lying, or something's real messed up in here." Lena sat curled on her thin mattress, knees pulled tight, trying to block the voices seeping through the bars. Her heart pounded with dread, not at the pregnancy itself, but at the shadows of memory she couldn't quite touch, nights she woke with aches she couldn't explain, mornings when time felt stolen. Guard footsteps approached. Officer Rick Dalton, broad-shouldered and cold-eyed, paused at her bars. His smirk carried no warmth. "Congratulations, Marsh. Guess miracles do happen." She clenched her fists, refusing to meet his stare. "I don't know how this happened." "Sure you don't," he muttered, moving on, but the weight of his gaze lingered like chains around her throat. When lights dimmed, Graystone buzzed with restless speculation. Some inmates whispered theories of secret lovers. Others spoke of guards who took what they wanted and erased the evidence. A few muttered of darker things, experiments, drugs slipped into meals. Lena pressed her face into the thin pillow, trembling. She whispered into the silence, words meant only for herself. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't." Her voice cracked, fading into sobs muffled by the roar of voices outside her cell. By morning the prison was divided, half branding her a liar, half terrified the same fate might await them. Dr. Hale requested additional tests, determined to uncover truth where silence reigned. The warden, Elaine Porter, ordered every corner of the prison to be checked, insisting the walls see everything. Yet Lena knew the walls had secrets, and whatever truth they hid was already growing inside her. The warden's office smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, its blinds drawn tight against the rising sun. Elaine Porter sat rigid at her desk, a woman who had built her reputation on control. Yet now her hands drummed against the polished wood, betraying unease. Across from her, Dr. Mason Hale slid a folder forward. "I've confirmed it twice. Lena Marsh is pregnant." Elaine's jaw tightened. "And you're telling me this is unexplained?" "Unless there's something happening here we don't see," Hale replied. His voice carried a weight that made the room colder. The warden leaned back, pressing her fingers together. Graystone's reputation was already fragile. A scandal like this could crush it. She reached for the intercom, her voice sharp. "Get surveillance. Every corridor, every cell block. Last 12 months. Hours later, the security office buzzed with the hum of monitors. Rows of screens flickered with frozen images of concrete halls and locked doors. Officers leaned over keyboards, fast-forwarding through weeks of footage. Nothing. Only routine, guards walking their rounds, inmates shuffling in lines, doors slamming shut. Detective Harper Quinn hadn't been called in yet, but Elaine Porter already knew she needed outside eyes. Still, she wasn't ready to admit weakness. She stood over the technicians, her gaze narrowed. There has to be something. No one just appears pregnant. One officer muttered, "Maybe she's been hiding it longer than she says." Elaine's eyes cut to him like a blade. Or maybe someone's hiding for her. Meanwhile, whispers spread faster than the footage could rewind. In the cafeteria, trays clattered as inmates watched Lena walk past, her shoulders hunched, eyes on the floor. Some smirked, others shifted uneasily. Carla Vega whispered, "If the cameras didn't catch it, then it happened where cameras don't reach." Her words echoed like a curse. Back in her cell, Lena sat cross-legged, fingers tracing cracks in the wall. Every time a guard walked by, she flinched. The sound of keys, the jingle of authority scraped against her nerves. When Officer Dalton's heavy steps passed, her stomach knotted. That night, Elaine reviewed footage herself. She froze on an image of the infirmary hallway. Lena entering for a routine checkup months back. The camera glitched for 2 seconds. The picture warped, then returned to normal. A gap so small most wouldn't notice, but Elaine did. She replayed it again and again. 2 seconds missing. What could happen in 2 seconds? Her throat tightened. She pushed the file aside, muttering under her breath. The walls watch everything, but someone's making them lie. Outside her window, the prison lights glowed harsh against the dark. Inside, the silence pressed heavier than the locks. The next morning, Elaine summoned Hale. "This doesn't stay quiet," she said. "We dig deeper, every blind spot, every skipped second of tape." He nodded, though his eyes revealed dread. For the first time in years, the warden realized she wasn't the one in control. The prison was, and the walls were keeping secrets. The night pressed heavy on Lena's chest as she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling above her bunk. The whispers had grown louder through the day, but now only her memories whispered back, unwanted, jagged, pulling her into a place she had tried to bury. Sleep blurred into fragments of childhood. A kitchen filled with stale cigarette smoke. Her mother's slurred voice rising. A glass shattering against the wall. Lena, no older than 7, clutching a ragged doll as her father's shadow loomed large. His words cruel, his absence even crueler. Love had never stayed in that house. It had come and gone like a thief, leaving only hunger behind. She blinked, pulling herself back to the present. The grey walls around her offered no comfort, only a reminder that she had traded one prison for another. Dr. Hale's words from earlier echoed in her skull. "You're pregnant." Her fists clenched the blanket until her nails dug crescents into her palms. She remembered how trust had always betrayed her. The boy she had loved at 16, who promised escape, had left her stranded on a highway with bruises blooming on her arms. The friend who swore loyalty had turned her in when drugs were found in her apartment. Every bond had become a blade. The silence cracked when Carla's voice drifted through the bars. "You awake?" Lena hesitated. "Yes." Carla shifted, her tone low, cautious. "I believe you. You don't look like you're lying." A bitter laugh slipped past Lena's lips. "Doesn't matter if I am or not. No one cares about truth in here." Carla pressed. "Then tell me, how did it happen?" Lena's throat tightened. She searched her memory, desperate for clarity. Nights blurred together, the sting of injections during routine medical checks, the strange heaviness in her limbs afterward, mornings when her body felt invaded, though no face came to mind. She shook her head violently. "I don't know. I swear I don't." Carla didn't answer, but her silence carried weight. The following morning, Lena sat at the metal table during roll call, her eyes hollow, her posture small. She had grown used to ridicule. But this was different. A group of inmates watched her with both disgust and fear, as if she carried a curse. One muttered, "If it happened to her, it could happen to us." Those words lodged deep inside Lena. She wasn't just the object of gossip anymore. She was a warning. Later, in the yard, the wind stung her cheeks as she tried to walk off the fog in her mind. Every sound of the gates clanging shut, every guard's laugh, made her stomach twist. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I didn't let this happen. I didn't." But deep inside, shadows stirred. Memories not fully formed, sensations she couldn't explain. She wondered if the prison itself was swallowing her sanity. As the sun dipped behind the fences, Lena felt Carla's eyes on her, filled with something she hadn't seen in years, pity. For the first time since the news broke, Lena felt a deeper terror. Not of pregnancy, not of gossip, but of the possibility that she was right. That something inside these walls had chosen her. Dr. Mason Hale lingered in the infirmary long after the day's rounds were complete. The scent of antiseptic clung to his coat, but it was the silence that gnawed at him. On his desk lay Lena Marsh's file, her blood work clipped neatly, her pregnancy confirmed beyond question. Yet the edges of the truth were jagged, impossible to align. He rubbed his temples, staring at the numbers. 2 years, he whispered to himself. 2 years inside these walls without a single documented male contact. It should have been impossible. When the door creaked, Hale startled. Officer Dalton stepped in, his boots striking the floor with deliberate weight. "Still here, Doc? Burning the midnight oil?" Hale forced calm into his voice. "Just reviewing records." Dalton leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Rumors are wild tonight. Miracle baby and all that." Hale's stomach tightened. "This isn't a joke. Relax." Dalton's tone was mocking, but his eyes carried something sharper. "Prison's full of liars. She probably found a way to sneak around. Not your problem." Hale looked down, hiding his unease. Dalton left as abruptly as he came, but the echo of his boots lingered long after. Later, while filing Lena's chart, Hale noticed faint bruises along her inner arm from earlier in the week, shaped not like an accident, but like the press of fingers. When he asked about them, she had only shrugged, her eyes dark with exhaustion. He had documented it quietly, knowing full well such notes could vanish if the wrong hands interfered. That night, Hale walked the empty corridor to the staff lounge. His reflection stared back from the glass pane of the vending machine, tired eyes, a man caught between duty and fear. He thought of his own daughter at home, only a few years younger than Lena. The thought of her trapped in this place made his chest constrict. He whispered to himself, if someone did this, someone inside. The thought trailed into silence he didn't dare complete. The next day, he confronted Warden Porter, sliding the report across her desk. "The bruises aren't consistent with normal activity. Something is happening to her." Elaine's lips tightened, her eyes scanning the paper briefly before locking on his. "Are you accusing my staff?" "I'm saying she's not lying," Hale replied, voice steady despite the chill that ran through him. "And if she's telling the truth, then someone here is covering their tracks." For a long moment, the warden said nothing. Then she closed the folder with a snap. "Keep this contained. We don't fan flames until we know what we're dealing with." Hale left her office with unease coiled in his gut. He knew too well what silence cost in Graystone. That night, as he turned off the infirmary lights, his eyes fell once more on Lena's file. The weight of it felt heavier than steel. And for the first time he wondered if the prison itself was trying to bury him in secrets too. The cafeteria buzzed louder than the clatter of trays. Graystone's mornings were usually marked by routine line-up, eat fast, keep quiet, but today every corner seemed to pulse with whispers. Eyes darted toward Lena, sitting alone at the end of a table, her untouched food cooling in front of her. Carla Vega, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, leaned close to her bunkmate across the table. "You hear? She swears she hasn't touched anyone in years." Her bunkmate snorted. "Yeah, right. Everyone's touched someone. Even in here." But Carla's gaze stayed fixed on Lena, her brow furrowed. "No, look at her. That's not a lie she's telling. That's fear." Nearby, a younger inmate whispered too loudly. "Maybe she's sleeping with Dalton. He likes to hang around her block." The words carried, reaching Lena's ears. Her throat tightened, but she didn't look up. The warden had tried to clamp down on the rumors, but words spread faster than locks. By midday, theories collided like sparks in dry grass. Some believed Lena had found a secret lover. Others muttered about doctors experimenting on inmates, using their bodies without consent. A few whispered the darkest thought, that if Lena could wake up pregnant with no memory of how, then none of them were safe. That night in the common area, Carla approached Lena directly. She lowered her voice so the guards wouldn't hear. "Tell me the truth, you really don't know." Lena's eyes flickered, haunted. "I told the doctor. I don't remember. I swear I don't." Carla studied her for a long moment, then leaned back, shaking her head. Then it's worse than I thought. From the corner of the room, another inmate, Ruthie Kane, chuckled darkly. You're all acting like this is new. Guards take what they want, always have. The room went still at her words. Ruthie was older, a woman who had spent half her life inside. She spoke with the weight of someone who had seen too much. They hide it, Ruthie continued, her voice bitter. Pay off the right people, erase the right tapes. If she's pregnant, it's because someone wanted her that way. Carla's stomach twisted. She wanted to believe it was just rumor, but Lena's pale face told her otherwise. Later, in their cells, whispers carried through the bars like smoke. Inmates recited theories, each darker than the last. Some swore they'd felt strange after infirmary visits. Others muttered about blackouts, about waking up sore, about gaps in their memory they had long ignored. Lena pressed her palms to her ears, rocking slightly as the voices swelled around her. Every word scraped against her skin until she wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered into the dark, "It can't be real, it can't." But as the lights dimmed, Carla's words lingered in the silence between cells. If it happened once, it'll happen again. The chorus of fear grew heavier, pressing down on every woman in Graystone. And in the warden's office, the unanswered question hung in the stale air. How much longer before whispers turned into screams? Elaine Porter stood by the narrow window of her office, staring out at the grey yard below. The prison lights hummed faintly against the dawn, casting long shadows across the fence. She had built her career on discipline and control, yet the last few days felt like water slipping through her hands. Rumors she couldn't stop, fear she couldn't contain. And now the suspicion that the danger wasn't outside but within her own walls. When the knock came, sharp and deliberate, Elaine straightened. "Come in." Rick Dalton filled the doorway, broad shoulders blocking the light. His uniform was crisp, his face unreadable. He gave a half smile as he stepped inside, closing the door with a heavy click. "You wanted to see me, Warden?" Elaine's gaze hardened. "Sit." Dalton eased into the chair opposite her, stretching slightly, as if he owned the space. His presence carried a weight she disliked, too confident, too unbothered by authority. "I'll be direct," she said. "There are accusations circulating. Lena Marsh's pregnancy is a fact, and I need to know if any member of my staff—" Dalton cut her off with a laugh, low and dismissive. "Accusations from who? Inmates. You know better than to trust their stories. They'll say anything for attention." Elaine's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking for jokes. I'm asking if you or your officers have had contact with her. Any contact that breaks protocol." He leaned forward, his smile fading. "You're accusing me?" "I'm asking," Elaine snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. Dalton's eyes darkened, the smirk gone. "No, I've done my job, like always. Maybe you should be asking how well you know your inmates. Some of them are manipulative. Maybe Marsh found a way." Elaine studied him in silence. His words were calm, but his posture betrayed offense, laced with defiance. She saw the flicker of something beneath the surface, something colder. "I'll be reviewing every shift report," she said finally. "If anything looks wrong, I won't hesitate." Dalton's jaw flexed. "You should be careful, Warden. Accusing a loyal officer without proof, that could tear this place apart." The warning sat heavy between them. When he left, the room felt colder. Elaine exhaled slowly, pressing her palms against the desk. She had wanted reassurance, a denial she could trust. Instead, Dalton had given her the kind of answer that only deepened suspicion. Later that evening, she walked the corridors alone. Guards saluted as she passed, but their eyes carried questions. The air felt thick with unspoken things. She paused by Lena's block, watching as the young woman sat curled on her bunk, arms wrapped around herself, gaze vacant. Elaine's chest tightened. For the first time, she wondered if she had failed the very people she was meant to protect. Above the hum of the lights, she caught the faintest whisper, Carla murmuring to another inmate. "Dalton's name keeps coming up, and nobody's safe if he's untouchable." Elaine turned away, her steps quickening. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls of Graystone weren't protecting anyone anymore. They were protecting secrets. Rain hammered the prison roof like fists in the night. Water trickled down the barred windows, blurring the outside world into streaks of grey. Inside the cell block, lights dimmed to their nightly hum, and the restless murmurs of inmates faded into uneasy silence. Lena lay on her side, eyes wide open. Sleep had abandoned her days ago. The weight in her chest pressed harder with each passing night, as if the walls themselves wanted to suffocate her. Every time she closed her eyes, fragments flashed, hands on her arms, voices she couldn't name, the taste of metal in her mouth. She sat up abruptly, trembling. From the next cell, Carla's whisper cut through the dark. "You're awake again." Lena clutched her knees. "I can't sleep." Carla shifted on her bunk, her voice hushed but steady. "You're not telling them everything, are you?" Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, but the words clung to her tongue. "I don't remember." "You remember something," Carla pressed. "I see it on your face." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady drip of water somewhere down the hall. Finally, Lena whispered, barely audible. "Sometimes I wake up sore, like someone's been here. But when I open my eyes, I'm alone." Carla inhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the bars between them. "And the guards?" "I don't know," Lena said, her voice cracking. "I don't see anyone. Just shadows. I think it's a dream, but then I find bruises. I can't explain. And now this." Her hand drifted to her stomach, trembling. "It feels like my body isn't mine anymore." Carla closed her eyes, her jaw tense. "They'll call you a liar. They'll say you made it up. But if what you're saying is true," she trailed off, fear coating her words. Lena's breathing grew ragged. "What if I'm losing my mind? What if I made it all up in my head?" Carla's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as a blade. "No, don't say that. Someone did this to you." A crack of thunder rattled the block, drowning their voices for a moment. Lena buried her face in her hands, rocking slightly. She wanted to believe Carla, wanted to believe the fear clawing at her chest wasn't madness, but the memories came in fragments, needles, pressure, silence, never enough to form a whole truth. When the thunder faded, Carla spoke again, softer this time. "Whatever's happening here, you're not the only one. I felt it too. Like something's wrong when they take us to medical. Like we don't come back the same." Lena froze, lifting her head. Their eyes met through the bars, and for the first time she didn't feel alone, but the realization chilled her deeper than the rain. If Carla was right, then she wasn't just a victim, she was one of many. And somewhere in the dark, someone was still watching. Detective Harper Quinn leaned over the humming bank of monitors in the surveillance room, his sharp eyes narrowing at the grainy footage. He hadn't wanted this case, he despised prisons, their stench of decay and secrets, but Warden Porter's desperate call had brought him here. Now the images flickering before him told a story more disturbing than he expected. "Run it back," he ordered, his voice clipped. The technician rewound the tape, freezing on a section of the medical wing hallway. For hours the frame looked ordinary: guards passing, nurses pushing carts, inmates escorted under watchful eyes. But then a flicker, barely a second, cut through the footage. Static, silence. And when the picture returned, Lena Marsh was no longer in the hallway. Quinn straightened, his jaw tight. "Where did she go?" The technician stammered, clicking frantically. It jumps. We don't have those few seconds." Warden Porter stood behind them, arms folded, face pale. She had suspected glitches, but hearing it from Quinn made her stomach twist. "Check the logs," Quinn demanded. "Camera maintenance, access cards, anyone who touched this system." Minutes later, the technician frowned. "Sir, there's no record. These files were spliced. Someone knew what they were doing." The room fell silent, except for the hum of machinery. Porter's breath hitched, though she tried to mask it. Graystone's walls were supposed to be impenetrable, its cameras unblinking eyes. Now those eyes were blind by choice. Quinn leaned closer to the monitors. "Show me the rest of the prison, every angle." Hours passed as they combed through footage. Patterns emerged, odd skips near the storage corridor, sections of tape repeating themselves, subtle gaps too small for most to notice. Inmates vanished into blind spots, only to reappear minutes later, as if nothing had happened. Porter gripped the back of Quinn's chair, her nails digging into the leather. "You're saying there are corridors the cameras don't cover?" "Not natural blind spots," Quinn replied. "Deliberate ones. Someone created them." The weight of his words settled over her. Helene had always believed control meant visibility, that nothing happened in Graystone without her knowing. Now she realized someone had been moving unseen, right under her nose. Meanwhile, in the cell block, the storm of whispers grew. Carla leaned toward Lena during mealtime, her eyes sharp. "They're hiding places here, spots the cameras don't see." Lena froze, her spoon clattering against the tray. "How do you know?" "I've watched them," Carla whispered. "Guards leading women down corridors that don't show up on tape. We never see them again until morning, and they never talk about it." The words burrowed into Lena's mind like poison. Every ache in her body, every lost hour of memory, every bruise she couldn't explain, it all pointed to those missing corridors. That night, as lights dimmed, Lena lay awake listening to footsteps echo in the hall. She imagined invisible hands pulling strings in the dark, guiding women into the places no one saw. Her stomach churned with dread, the weight inside her no longer just a child, but evidence of a truth too dangerous to hold. Back in the surveillance room, Quinn replayed the flicker of static one more time. His reflection stared back from the screen, grim and tired. He turned to Porter, his voice low. "Your prison has blind spots, and those blind spots are hunting grounds." Porter's face drained of color. She had wanted answers, but not this one. And deep within Graystone, secrets lay waiting in the corridors where no camera dared to see. Dr. Mason Hale sat alone in the infirmary, the glow of the desk lamp illuminating stacks of charts. The silence was broken only by the rustle of papers as he flipped through medical records, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. Something didn't add up. Lena's file contained not just test results, but notes from visits she swore had never happened. Dates marked with routine exams, signatures in his own name, except he knew he hadn't been there. His stomach tightened as he traced the handwriting. The strokes were close, practiced but not his. Someone had forged his hand. He leaned back, whispering into the empty room. "Why her?" A chill prickled his skin as he opened another file. More anomalies surfaced. Carla Vega's chart showed extra entries, strange injections listed under vague terms like supplemental dosage. Other inmates too, always women who had complained of headaches, dizziness, or blackouts. The realization spread like ice in his veins. These weren't mistakes, they were patterns. The door creaked open suddenly. Hale snapped the folder shut as Officer Dalton stepped inside, his shadow filling the doorway. "Working late again?" Dalton asked, voice smooth but edged with suspicion. Hale forced calm. "Just reviewing." Dalton's eyes swept the room before landing on the stack of files. His smirk returned. "Careful, Doc. Too much digging, you'll find things you wish you hadn't." The warning lingered long after Dalton left, his boots echoing down the corridor like a countdown. Later, Hale returned to Lena's file, his hands trembling slightly. He remembered her pale face, the bruises she couldn't explain, the hollow fear in her voice. Now the falsified records spoke louder than her silence ever could. Someone had altered history to erase truth. In her cell, Lena sat curled against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. Every sound unsettled her, the rattle of keys, the slam of doors, even footsteps muffled by the night. She whispered to herself, "They're watching, always watching." Carla's voice drifted from the next cell. "You're shaking again." Lena pressed her forehead to the cold wall. "It's like they know when I'm awake, like they're waiting for me to close my eyes." Carla's tone softened, though fear underlined every word. "Then don't let them break you. That's what they want." But Lena could feel the cracks forming inside her, each whisper in the dark another fracture. She no longer knew if the shadows in her mind were dreams or memories. Back in the infirmary, Hale slipped the falsified files into a locked drawer, though he knew locks meant little in Graystone. He exhaled, the decision heavy on his shoulders. To speak out would mean risking his career, maybe even his safety. But silence would mean complicity. As the lights buzzed overhead, he whispered a promise to himself. I'll find the truth. The walls of Graystone seemed to tighten around him, as though daring him to try. The night was heavy, with silence, broken only by the occasional clang of a distant gate. Carla Vega sat awake on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. The whispers about Lena had not stopped. If anything, they had grown sharper. Yet it wasn't just gossip that unsettled Carla. It was the way Lena trembled, the way her eyes darted as if someone else lived behind them. That evening, when guards dragged inmates to showers, Carla lingered near Lena's cell. She had noticed how Lena always hesitated before leaving, her gaze flicking nervously to her mattress. The moment the corridor cleared, Carla slipped inside. The cell smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. Her eyes swept across the narrow space, a stack of letters, scraps of paper, and the thin mattress folded neatly at the edges. Kneeling, she lifted the corner and froze. Beneath the mattress lay a worn notebook, its cover frayed, pages swollen from hidden tears. Carla's pulse quickened as she opened it. Scrawled handwriting filled the pages, erratic, uneven. The first entries were simple. Dates, short lines about meals, boredom, loneliness. But as she turned the pages, the writing shifted. Woke up with bruises again. Don't remember how. Smell of chemicals. Couldn't move. Saw shadows. Dreamed someone touched my stomach. But it wasn't a dream. Carla's breath hitched. She flipped further. The words became frantic, scratched across the paper with desperate strokes. They make me sleep. I wake up different. I hear voices when I'm alone. I don't know if they're real. This isn't my body anymore. Her hands trembled as she shut the notebook. The entries were fragmented, like broken glass. Were they hallucinations, or memories Lena couldn't face? Carla didn't know, but the fear bleeding from those pages felt real enough. The sound of footsteps jolted her. Shoving the notebook back under the mattress, she slipped out just as Lena returned, escorted by a guard. Carla's heart pounded as she climbed back into her own cell, hiding her shaking hands under the blanket. Later, when the lights dimmed and the block settled into uneasy sleep, Carla whispered through the bars, "Lena." No answer. She tried again, softer. "I saw it. Your journal." A sharp intake of breath, then silence. Finally, Lena's voice broke through, raw and trembling. "You weren't supposed to." Carla pressed her hand against the cold steel. "You're not crazy. Whatever's happening to you, it's in there. The words, they're real." Lena's voice cracked. "Or maybe I made it all up. Maybe I've lost my mind." "No," Carla said firmly, though fear churned in her stomach. "What I read, no one makes that up. Not like that." For a long time, Lena said nothing. Then in a whisper so faint Carla barely caught it, she admitted, "Sometimes I think I hear them breathing when I sleep. And when I open my eyes, there's nothing there." The words hung between them like a blade. Carla shut her eyes, clutching the blanket tighter. The journal hadn't just revealed Lena's torment, it had planted a new terror in her own heart. If the entries were true, then someone in Graystone was stealing pieces of women's lives under the cover of silence. And the walls were helping hide it. Detective Harper Quinn sat in the surveillance room long past midnight, the blue glow of monitors painting his face in harsh light. Cigarette smoke lingered in his lungs, though he hadn't touched one in years. The habit still clung in memory whenever frustration gnawed at him. He replayed the footage for the third time that hour, a hallway outside the infirmary. Routine, ordinary, unremarkable, until the screen flickered with static. For a fraction of a second, the image warped. When it cleared, Lena Marsh was gone, replaced by an empty corridor. "Pause," Quinn ordered. The technician froze the frame. Quinn leaned closer, studying the jagged edges of the static. "That's not equipment failure. Someone cut this tape." The technician swallowed. "Sir, the system's supposed to be tamper-proof." Quinn gave a dry laugh. "Nothing's tamper-proof when the fox is guarding the henhouse." He demanded older files, weeks back, months even. The pattern emerged quickly, small skips, 2 or 3 seconds at a time, always in the same corridors, the medical wing, the storage hall, the infirmary's back entrance. each glitch subtle enough to go unnoticed. Together they formed a map of blind spots. Warden Porter stood behind him, her arms crossed tight, her eyes fixed on the screens. She had tried to convince herself the whispers were just paranoia, but seeing it laid bare cracked her composure. "How many?" she asked quietly. Quinn's jaw tightened. "Too many, and all the splices are deliberate. Someone's been erasing pieces of this prison's history." Porter gripped the back of his chair. "Why would they risk it? Why cover this up?" Quinn looked at her, his voice low. "Because the truth would destroy this place. And whoever's behind it knows you don't want that on your record." The words stung, but Elaine didn't flinch. She only turned back to the screens, her silence an answer of its own. In the cell block, rumors had already taken a life of their own. Carla whispered to Lena through the bars. "They're messing with the cameras. I heard the guards talking. They know places the walls don't see." Lena's stomach twisted. She gripped the edge of her bunk, her voice breaking. "Then it's real. I wasn't dreaming." Carla's reply was steady but laced with dread. "It's worse than we thought." Back in the surveillance room, Quinn demanded copies of the tampered files. The technician hesitated, glancing nervously toward the door. "If Dalton finds out—" "I'll deal with Dalton," Quinn cut in sharply. "Give me the copies." The man obeyed, transferring the files onto a drive with trembling hands. Quinn pocketed it, his expression grim. As he left the room, Porter caught his arm. "If this gets out, Graystone burns." "Maybe it should," Quinn said flatly. Their eyes locked, both knowing the weight of what he carried. That night, as Quinn walked through the dim corridors toward his car, he felt eyes on him. The hum of the lights overhead seemed louder, oppressive. Somewhere deep inside the prison, someone was watching not through the cameras, but through the shadows the cameras didn't see. And they knew he had found proof. Detective Harper Quinn stood in the narrow hallway outside the guard's locker room, his hand tightening around the flash drive in his pocket. The evidence weighed heavier than steel. Hours of tampered footage, gaps that told stories more damning than words. He had enough to make enemies, but not yet enough to win. When the door swung open, Rick Dalton emerged, his uniform jacket slung casually over his shoulder. His smirk appeared before his words did. "Detective, burning the midnight oil?" Quinn's gaze was unflinching. "We need to talk." Dalton arched a brow. "That sounds serious." Quinn didn't move, forcing Dalton to stop in the hallway. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting shadows across his face. "The cameras don't lie, unless someone makes them." "You've been busy, Dalton." For a heartbeat, Dalton's smirk faltered, then returned sharper, colder. "Careful with your words. Accusing an officer without proof is a dangerous game." "I've got proof," Quinn said evenly. "Blind spots, spliced files. The same areas you control. You've been using them." Dalton stepped closer, the air thick with the smell of stale cologne and sweat. His voice dropped to a low growl. "You don't know what you're talking about. Those women, they'll say anything to get sympathy. And you, outsider, don't get to tell me how this prison runs." Quinn held his ground, though he could feel Dalton's heat pressing against him like a threat. "This isn't about sympathy, it's about truth. And if Marsh's pregnancy doesn't break this place open, something else will." Dalton's eyes narrowed, the humor gone. "You think anyone will believe her? She's a convict, a liar. You put her on the stand, she crumbles. They'll destroy her before they ever look at me." The words carried a chilling confidence, the certainty of a man who had seen power work in his favor too many times. Quinn leaned closer, his voice razor-sharp. "Maybe, but when the tapes show gaps, when records show your name stamped where it doesn't belong, when bruises match your grip, then even men like you fall." Dalton's jaw flexed. For a moment silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Then Dalton chuckled, low and dangerous. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But bold men don't last long in places like this." He stepped past Quinn, brushing his shoulder deliberately as he went. His boots echoed down the hall, each step like a warning. Quinn exhaled slowly, forcing his pulse to steady. He had rattled Dalton, but not broken him. That kind of predator didn't scare easily. Meanwhile, inside the block, Lena sat on her bunk, arms wrapped around her stomach. Carla whispered through the bars, "Did you see him today? Dalton's strutting more than ever, like he knows something we don't." Lena's voice trembled. "He's the one, isn't he?" Carla hesitated, then nodded once. "He's the shadow over all of this, and if Quinn pushes too hard, he'll end up like the rest of us, trapped." In her cell, Lena shivered. The prison felt alive, its walls breathing with secrets, its corridors heavy with footsteps she couldn't see. She thought of the nights she woke without memory, of the cold press of fear against her skin, and she wondered if Dalton's shadow would ever lift, or if it was destined to swallow them all. In the warden's office, Quinn set the flash drive on Porter's desk. Her hands hovered above it, trembling. "Here's your proof," he said. "Now the question is, what are you willing to do with it?" The laundry room was dim, the hum of industrial machines masking footsteps that didn't belong. Carla Vega had stayed late, sorting linens with quiet efficiency, unaware of the shadow that trailed her. A sudden clang made her spin, heart hammering. The room was empty, or so it seemed. Then a hand pressed against her back, hard and unrelenting. Pain shot through her shoulder as she was shoved against the cold metal wall. She gasped, struggling, but the grip was iron, silent, except for the whispered threat. "You shouldn't know," a low voice growled. Carla tried to see the attacker, but the dim light and her sudden panic blurred everything. She kicked, punched, anything to break free, but the figure tightened their hold. Memories of whispered warnings in the yard, of Lena's bruises and vanished hours, collided in her mind. The attack was no random act. It was calculated, a message. Someone inside Graystone was ensuring the women who knew too much didn't speak. Finally, with a sharp twist, Carla broke free, staggering backward. She pressed her hand against the wall to stay upright, her breathing ragged. Blood trickled from a cut on her temple, staining her orange sleeves. Footsteps retreated down the hall, deliberate and unhurried. Carla pressed herself into the corner, stomach churning. She knew the warning was real. Lena wasn't the only one at risk. Anyone who got too close to the truth could pay the price. By the time the guard rounds checked in, Carla was slumped against the wall, feigning sleep. Her pulse thundered in her ears, each beat a reminder that secrecy had a cost. When she returned to her bunk later, she pressed an ice pack against her temple, shaking. Lena noticed immediately, her eyes wide. "What happened?" she whispered. Carla's voice was tight, controlled. "Nothing, just slipped." But Lena's eyes narrowed, reading the fear and the faint red smear along Carla's hairline. "They're warning you," she said softly. "They're warning anyone who tries to help me." Carla nodded, swallowing hard. She wanted to reassure Lena, wanted to say it was safe, but deep down she knew the walls weren't protecting them. They were enforcing silence. That night, whispers carried through the block in quiet, anxious bursts. Inmates speculated someone had attacked Carla. Yes, but why? Rumors named guards, shadows, even unseen cameras. Fear spread like a virus, infecting every corner, every bunk, every whispered conversation. Carla lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts circling the same truth. Knowledge was dangerous here, and once someone crossed the line, there was no going back. Lena, too, shivered in her bed, stomach twisting with the child growing inside her. If Carla had been targeted, what chance did she have? What invisible predator stalked the corridors, and how many more were already lost to its reach? By morning, the block moved cautiously, a silent understanding threading through the women. Fear had changed them all. They spoke less, watched more. Each glance over the shoulder, each hesitant step, carried the unspoken message. Someone was still out there, waiting. And anyone who dared to uncover the truth would be next. The prison hummed with silence, the only sounds the occasional clatter of keys and distant shouts from the yard. Detective Harper Quinn had installed hidden cameras throughout the infirmary and storage corridors, blind spots deliberately chosen to catch what the official surveillance could not. Tonight he hoped they would finally speak. Quinn watched the monitors, his hands clenched around the edge of the console. Lena Marsh lay on her bunk, her stomach growing round, her eyes distant, as if memories floated just beyond reach. Carla sat beside her, whispering words of comfort, trying to anchor her to reality. On the far monitor, the first sequence began to flicker. Shadows moved along the medical wing, figures unseen by normal cameras. Quinn's breath hitched. He froze the frame. A guard, broad-shouldered, hands gloved, guiding an inmate down a corridor that didn't appear on any official tape. "Stop," he muttered. He rewound, slow motion, then paused. Dalton's face appeared calm, predatory. He moved, with certainty, familiar with the blind spots. The footage showed no hesitation, no fear, just control. Quinn's stomach churned as he watched Dalton enter the infirmary, the figure of Lena flashing on the screen. She was unconscious or drugged, helpless. Her body moved without consent, her arms twisted, her eyes fluttering as she stirred, unable to comprehend what was happening. He pressed play. The sound was faint, muffled, the hum of machines, the shuffle of shoes, the low whisper of someone muttering Lena's name. The video revealed the nightmare she had tried to forget. The injections, the pressure, the hands that left bruises she couldn't explain. "Finally," Quinn whispered. He felt a rush of anger and relief. The pieces were falling into place. The fragments of Lena's memory, the injuries, the pregnancy, they weren't imagined. They were real. Across the room, Warden Porter's hands trembled as she leaned closer. "Is it?" Quinn didn't answer immediately, his eyes glued to the screen. The damning truth unfolded in muted, undeniable motion. Dalton manipulated the blind spots, moving inmates, enforcing silence with methods hidden from official oversight. Lena had been a victim, not of imagination, but of a predator who had thrived in the cracks of the system. Porter's voice broke the quiet. "We need to act. Now." Quinn nodded, already planning the next steps. They had the evidence, the arrests, the accountability. It was all within reach. But the cost was steep. He knew the prison would erupt when Dalton realized he had been caught. The other inmates would whisper, panic, perhaps even revolt. Meanwhile, Lena stirred, waking with a start, eyes wide, body trembling. She looked around, disoriented, until Quinn and Porter approached, calm but firm. "You're safe now," Quinn said, his voice steady. "We know everything. You're not alone anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time in months, she believed it. The fragmented images in her mind, the bruises, the injections, the stolen hours, they were not her fault. They were truth waiting to be seen. Carla gripped her hand through the bars, relief and fear warring in her expression. "They can't touch you now," she whispered. Yet even as the cameras had captured the full story, the prison itself felt alive with tension. Somewhere in the corridors, Dalton still existed, a shadow looming in memory, if not in sight. Quinn exhaled, glancing at the monitors one last time. The night had revealed everything, and the truth finally would not be silenced. The courthouse smelled of stale coffee and polished wood. Reporters jostled for position, microphones aimed at the empty chairs where Dalton would soon sit. Inside, Lena Marsh sat with Carla beside her, hands clasped tightly, knuckles white, the weight of months of stolen hours, broken trust and a pregnancy forced upon her, pressed against her chest. Detective Harper Quinn stood nearby, flash drive in pocket, evidence ready to dismantle the predator who had haunted Graystone. Warden Porter hovered in the back, her eyes flicking nervously between the courtroom doors and the judge's bench. The bailiff called the case. State versus Rick Dalton. Dalton entered, unshaken, the smirk he had worn in Graystone, now polished with arrogance. He shook hands with his attorneys, acknowledging the cameras, the press, and the whispers, with a confidence that made Lena's stomach twist. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution outlined the evidence. Tampered surveillance, falsified medical records, eyewitness testimony, and the newly captured footage showing Dalton using blind spots to control inmates. Lena felt every word sink into her skin like ice. Dalton's defense countered with strategy, painting Lena as unreliable, manipulative, and mentally unstable. "She fabricates stories," one lawyer insisted, seeking attention and sympathy. "The witnesses are flawed, the records are misinterpreted." Lena's stomach churned. She knew her truth, but the courtroom's cold gaze made her doubt. Could she withstand the scrutiny? Could she tell her story and survive the judgment of strangers? When called to testify, Lena rose, legs trembling, eyes scanning the packed room. She faced Dalton directly for the first time since Graystone. His eyes met hers, calm and calculating, and for a moment fear gripped her throat like a vice. The prosecutor's voice was steady, guiding her through the questions. Describe the events inside Graystone. What happened in the blind spots? Lena swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I was moved, drugged. I woke up bruised, alone, afraid. I don't remember all the details, but I know what I felt. Dalton's attorneys jumped, trying to catch her in contradictions, but each time Lena paused, thought, and repeated her truth. Carla's nod from the gallery strengthened her courage. The footage played, the images undeniable. Dalton moving women through blind corridors, manipulating them under the cover of invisible cameras. The courtroom gasped. Dalton's smirk faltered. "Do you recognize the man in the footage?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Lena said, voice firmer now. "That's him. Rick Dalton. He did this to us." Her statement hung in the air like a strike of lightning. The defense sputtered, scrambling. Dalton's presence was no longer commanding. It was exposed, vulnerable under the light of truth. As the trial progressed, each witness layered the evidence. Each document corroborated the nightmare Lena had endured. Months of fear, whispers, and bruises now formed a shield around her, a barrier against Dalton's lies. By the end of the day, the jury had seen the full scope. The tampered cameras, the coerced silence, the hidden corridors. The courtroom hummed with tension, the walls echoing with a truth that could no longer be ignored. When recess was called, Lena sank into her chair, exhaustion pulling at her limbs. She held Carla's hand, feeling both the weight of trauma and the fragile relief of justice on the horizon. Outside, the world was buzzing with the story of Graystone, of a predator exposed, of voices that had finally been heard. Inside, Lena whispered to herself, voice small but steady, "I survived. I'm still here." The morning sun seeped weakly through the small barred window of Graystone's infirmary, painting streaks of pale gold across the sterile floor. Lena Marsh lay on the cot, her hands pressed against her swollen stomach, every contraction a reminder of what she had endured and what she had survived. Carla sat beside her, holding her hand with a quiet intensity, eyes alert to every shiver, every labored breath. The hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of guards created a rhythm Lena had learned to breathe with, but now it only heightened the tension thrumming in her veins. The nurse's voice was calm, almost mechanical. "Push when I tell you. You're doing great." Lena's throat tightened, her body trembling with pain, fear, and exhaustion. Memories of blind corridors, bruises, whispers in the dark, and unseen hands pressed into her, like shadows pressing her to the floor. But amid that fear, a spark of determination burned fiercely. She would see this through. She would hold this child, her proof of survival, her testament to resilience. The hours stretched, the pain relentless, until finally a cry shattered the infirmary's silence. A tiny, fragile sound, but one more powerful than any scream Lena had ever heard. A nurse handed her the small bundle, swaddled in a thin blanket. Lena's hands trembled as she held the child to her chest, the weight of life and hope anchoring her amidst the storm of trauma. The baby's eyes blinked open, and for the first time in months, Lena felt the world tilt toward something unbroken, something that belonged to her and her alone. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of grief and release. Carla whispered softly, "You did it. You're still here. You made it." Lena pressed her forehead against the baby's, feeling the steady beat of tiny ribs beneath her hands. In that moment, the prison walls felt less like chains and more like a witness to her survival. Every bruise, every whispered fear, every sleepless night had led her here. Outside the infirmary, Graystone began to stir, its usual hum of control challenged by a story it could no longer suppress. Word of the birth traveled quickly among inmates, not as gossip but as quiet acknowledgement of resilience, a symbol that even in the darkest places, life could persist. Warden Porter arrived, her expression conflicted, carrying the weight of authority and accountability. She looked at Lena, at the child, and for a fleeting moment recognized the cost of silence, the price of power unchecked. Detective Quinn observed from a distance, the flash drive with damning evidence still burning a hole in his pocket. Justice was underway, but the scars left by months of fear would linger far longer than any sentence could reach. Lena whispered to the baby, her voice trembling but full of resolve. "You're mine, you're proof, and we're going to survive this." Carla held her shoulder, steady and warm. "We will," she said. "Together." And in that small room, amidst the sterile lights and the lingering tension of a prison that had held more secrets than it should, Lena felt a moment of unshakable clarity. The child was a beginning, not just of life but of defiance, of hope forged in the crucible of suffering. Though Graystone's walls would continue to echo with fear and whispered secrets, here, in the hold of a newborn, Lena found something untouchable. The past had carved its mark into her, but this child, small, fragile and alive, was proof that even in chains, the spirit could endure. Years later, Lena stood before a small audience, her child at her side, recounting the horrors of Graystone. The walls that once trapped her, silenced her, and threatened her life were now witnesses to truth. Hidden cameras, once instruments of terror, had revealed the crimes, forcing reforms and accountability. Carla, still by her side, had become an advocate for survivors, ensuring no woman endured the same fate. Lena's voice, once trembling in fear, now carried resilience. She spoke of stolen hours, invisible hands, and a pregnancy born of trauma, but also of survival, defiance, and hope. Outside, the world had heard their story, but for Lena, the measure of justice was living. The shadows of Graystone lingered, yet they no longer held power. Her past had shaped her, but she was free, and her echo, the truth, remained unbroken.